Welcome to Will's Personal Development Podcast, where we bring you data and science-backed answers and advice from billionaires. Hey everybody, this is Will Chow from Will's Personal Development Podcast, coming to you from willyoulaugh.com. In today's fresh new podcast episode, we will be recapping and reflecting on my takeaways from my interview with Kevin Kreider. If you're not aware, I did a whole interview with Kevin Kreider, and that was a bit of a production. We had planning, we had to meet up in person, we had to get the equipment, the video equipment, the microphone ready, and this guy was really cool. He was easy to work with. He was also very kind, looking to help, and also quite accomplished in the Asian American community. I think many Asian Americans, especially since I'm recording this during Asian Pacific Heritage Month, many Asian Americans have voiced the fact that they don't have a role model to look up to. They say that Jackie Chan and Jet Li don't count because although they're the only Asian male celebrities out there that are awesome, they feel like these people are more Asian, and they don't really get the American culture as much, as well as the fact that they're more about comedic talent. I don't know. I don't really get it, but I get it. You know what I'm saying? Like, basically, like, I understand. Like, Jackie Chan's more funny, and he's not really that masculine energy. And so, I mean, you could still see him as a role model in my eyes, but I also can empathize and understand the idea that, okay, but he's not a role model in the sense of an Asian man who expresses masculinity. And I would say Jet Li does that more, but a lot of Asians are like, it still doesn't count. Plus, I also think, like, well, why do they have to be Asian to learn how to be masculine? I mean, I guess I understand that they have to be Asian because you're Asian and then you relate to them. But so the point being, Kevin Kreider has come on board, and he is one of the modern examples of how you can be a masculine, successful Asian man. So really check out that podcast episode. It's also up on YouTube if you're more of a visual learner. And we just sit down for a nice hour-long interview. And he is a fitness model, also a fitness trainer. He's a Instagram influencer, and he's now working as a life coach to help other Asian Americans through success in life. He focuses more on social skills, confidence, inner fulfillment, and, you know, healing those inner psychological issues you have, as well as fitness and, you know, bodybuilding and so forth. So more so around the inner psychology and fitness realm, whereas I kind of cover more so the career, wealth, and happiness realm. But we both know that all of these are interrelated, so it was a great team up. And so in this podcast, I thought it'd be valuable to listeners to kind of do a reflection process and give you my takeaways, because that interview was an interview where, you know, it was about, you know, talking to him and getting his insights. But now in a more relaxed state that I'm in, where, you know, I can just sit back and record this podcast. Now I can go deep into, well, what did I like? What didn't I like about my own issues, and how I can relate those and tackle them based on what I learned. And perhaps you can get some value from this too, by seeing how you can apply these principles in a more concrete way, if that makes sense. So really cool stuff here. And guys, I get the whole role model thing. I get the references to Bruce Lee. Like, a lot of people constantly, they have for years and years, they still do. I mean, if anything, Bruce Lee's image has been growing every single year. It's probably perhaps even at its height once again for some reason. And that's partially because of the the legends that have kind of come out from, people looking back at his history, and then UFC coming about and becoming successful and all this stuff. But, people, I think one thing is, and Kevin touched on this briefly. One thing that Kevin mentioned about Bruce Lee was that he was someone that initially he didn't like because people made fun of him as a child because he looked like Bruce Lee, and they made fun of him for being Asian, and they would be like ching chong ching. But then when he finally started learning about Bruce Lee, he realized how Bruce is more so, he went through his own racist struggles, and he accomplished so much despite all the obstacles in his way. So you can kind of like see his journey with Bruce Lee. And of course, like if you want more from Kevin, obviously, check out the actual web page to that. I have links to his Instagram, his website, everything else. And that's going to be great in case you want to learn more from him. His Instagram has really good captions, by the way. He writes like mini essays every caption, and each photo like goes into a story, many on Bruce Lee. But you can check that out at willyouLaugh.com/Asian/masculinity. Once again, that's WILLYOULAUGH.com/Asian masculinity. It's basically willyouLaugh.com/Asian masculinity. So for me, here's my positive interpretation on what you can take from Bruce Lee. First and foremost, so what that this guy lived like 50 years ago? Just because he lived 50 years ago doesn't mean you can't learn from him and learn about masculinity and succeeding in life as an Asian. Just because he didn't live in your generation doesn't mean a lot of the same principles don't apply. In fact, 50 years isn't even that long ago. Like, people get inspiration and learn from people thousands of years ago, whether it's something religious or whether it's just, some text that they read. For example, Tim Ferriss loves Stoic philosophy. So does many people who follow Tim Ferriss, as well as Ryan Holiday and his followers. Ryan Holiday wrote a whole book on Stoicism, and the Stoicism, like they're a extinct civilization, and yet they're still learning and trying to reflect on that stuff. Let's take the case of Ben Franklin. Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett really admire Ben Franklin. This guy has been dead for over 100 years. So I think this whole idea that I see so common of how, Bruce Lee died 40 years ago, I have no male role models. It's a bit absurd to me, but I also kind of understand it because, I get it. You're growing up, you're trying to look for people. And this was the way for me too. You're looking for people who look like you, who are successful and masculine in the cartoons and the movies and TV shows you watch. And you don't see that. And you just grow up confused. So I get it. But don't use this as an excuse. I think, there's so much information, on Bruce Lee out there right now. I mean, we're not saying we know his entire life, but we know quite a lot of it. So, that's something I can do better at myself. For me, I think there's so much that Bruce Lee has done that really blows away excuses. Like, if you really study his life, this guy came from China into a Hollywood world where people were maybe 2 or 3 times as racist and against Asians as they are now, to a point where they will dub anything you say so that it would have an extreme Chinese accent. I mean, if you watch his movies, all the fight sequences have all this hoya, haya stuff in there, and they don't let him talk. And when you really actually study his journey, it was not easy. He persevered. He stayed positive. He worked hard. He did what he could. This guy networked for years, while just running like a little martial arts academy, trying to make his dream of succeeding in Hollywood come true. And he kept failing and failing, and finally after many years, and he was already like, getting up there in age, he carved out this niche doing personal martial arts training for Hollywood A-list actors. And he leveraged that after, becoming established for a few years to eventually get a role as a sidekick to a TV show called The Green Hornet. And he put his all into it. They even had an episode towards the end where the Green Hornet and his character's name was Sato, they fought Batman and Robin. I mean, that's pretty cool. Who can say that was true? Like, it was basically a crossover episode with the Batman TV show at the time. And then it got canceled after one season. I mean, can you believe that? So he persevered through so much, and like he thought, and then his life ended so short. So, it's so many lessons in there. Like, you never know when life's gonna end. Plus, it's about patience, perseverance, hard work. I mean, this guy was a workaholic. Like, if you watch the interviews on YouTube of Chuck Norris talking about Bruce Lee, he was pretty much, he kept saying that Bruce Lee was a straight up workaholic. Like, he may even work harder than Gary Vaynerchuk, the entrepreneur, who's always like shouting on social media to work hard. I mean, this guy was like ridiculous. Like, he would work and work and work nonstop. And Chuck Norris said it was a problem. I mean, Chuck Norris works really hard too. He was like the world champion in his kickboxing martial art. So I don't want to make this entirely about Bruce Lee. So to just sum it up, I think there's a lot of lessons there that I can internalize too. I mean, I do complain. For me, it's more about like dating, and I get more entitled about that. And one could argue, Bruce Lee was genetically more gifted in those categories. Maybe he was just naturally a hard worker. He was naturally very charismatic, so he could get the girls and so forth. He married a white woman as a wife. So, all these excuses that people put up, like this guy 50 years ago, debunked them. So, as Gary Vaynerchuk and others say, like, if someone just like you has done it before, coming from just where you are or even worse, then you can't complain. And, there's all these factors involved. Yes, he may have been genetically more gifted in certain areas, maybe more naturally charismatic, confident, cool. I mean, this guy never stuttered, but you can still learn a lot. Now, moving on, of course, I can spend hours just talking about Bruce Lee and what you can learn from him, but I want to go back to Kevin Kreider. I think one thing, I have a list of quotes, which you can again also see at the show notes, that I really thought impacted me. Here's one. We are creating our own reality by the things we look at and click on. So for me, I think this is something that it's not the biggest issue, but it is still an issue. There are people who just keep clicking and reading stuff that destroys them because it's all negative. For me, it's just neutral. And I think at least it could be better. Like, I'll just be scrolling through Instagram and just looking at like people who are working out and putting in work. And sometimes it's inspirational, but oftentimes it's just mind numbing. It's like, I'm doing this because I'm bored, and it's a form of escapism because I want a better life. And this is the best I can, do to cope with that. So don't live a life of desperation. If you catch yourself doing something like that, stop. Here's another quote from his that I think is really impactful. I just thought that getting big muscles, I would be masculine by default. That's a big misconception. Now, I know the grammar for that isn't accurate, but that's how he said it. So I want to give a exact quote there, and you get the main message. I think this is huge. I think a lot of people, again, Lewis Howes wrote a great book on masculinity called The Mask of Masculinity, and he touches on some core principles and myths around masculinity. Like, you can't cry if you want to be masculine, or that if you're really rich or successful or famous, you'll be masculine and you'll be successful and happy. And that's just not always true. And the same thing with muscles. I think, when I've read a few books and really listened to a few lectures on masculinity, and I would say that one takeaway, is that masculinity is not just about having, the resources and ability to protect. It's also about being willing to protect and stand up for others when the time comes. You see, masculinity and being a man is not just about fighting and killing. It's about doing that to protect your tribe. So I think that's incredibly important. It's not just, having big muscles. And you can extend that to, having big muscles will make you happy. Maybe that's not true. There's another, going along with the theme of Asian, there's another YouTuber called The Healthy Gamer. This guy used to be huge a couple years ago. I used to follow him a lot. Now he's kind of just like stopped posting videos, but he's also an Asian adoptee, and his name's Jack Jones. His username is The Healthy Gamer, and he's basically like a super jacked, muscular guy who mainly does like body weight calisthenic training. And he's a ridiculously successful bodybuilder. And basically I'm bringing this up because he's made a few videos and they're kind of like documentaries in a way, but, short little mini documentaries where he explains how, he was a skinny Asian kid growing up and didn't feel good. And he got into personal development, which I'm huge in. I love personal development a lot, but he went further and brought it to bodybuilding. And within a few years, he worked really hard and got the muscular body that he wanted, but nothing changed. Girls still didn't really, interact with him differently, and he didn't feel any happier. And this whole myth of, once I get muscles, everything will turn out, it didn't actually work out. So that's really important to really fathom. He concluded that it's more about like the internal journey, the act of getting there. I think that's true, but I also recommend you check out my articles on the science of happiness, where it's, there's been a lot of research, decades of research on this, and it's a mixture of having a certain base level of money, giving back to others, having strong relationships with males and females as friends. And that trifecta, along with a few other minor things, can really bring you happiness that's enduring. So check out that post if you want more details at willyoulaugh.com/happy. Moving on to another quote, is, I don't talk to people like that because then their world becomes my world. This goes along with basically who you choose to associate yourself with. Now, from my personal experiences, reality doesn't always map with theory. A lot of these experts and successful people will say, oh, you just got to hang out with super awesome people. And they're right, but some people can misinterpret that, and they'll be like, I got to hang out with millionaire, positive bodybuilders all the time. And with that standard, you're not going to find anyone. For me, I found that, this one coworker, this one person at my gym is more positive than the rest. Maybe he's not really good with his personal finance. He's, just doing average in life. But at least in this category, when I'm at the gym, when he's working out, he's pushing harder than the rest. He's not complaining. I'm going to leverage that because that's what you can do with your resources. I recently released a interview with the Fung Bros as a blog post. It was a text-based interview, and that's one of their tips. The Fung Bros have like 3 million subscribers on YouTube, and I asked them how do you get there? Like when you have limited resources and connections and stuff, like any advice on that? And they were like, life's kind of like a video game. It's mathematical. Like you have a certain amount of resources and stuff, and you leverage the heck out of them as much as you can to get to the next level. And I never thought about it in that mathematical way. I think a lot of us just resort to our emotional reptilian lower brain, and we just kind of let complaints and frustration build up, and we're just like, we don't, logically pull back and say like, well, what can I leverage? What can I do wrong? Because, we do get frustrated at times. So wrapping up here, I want to give you a few more insights that I picked up that I think I will take action on, and maybe you can learn something from and take value of on your own. One of them being, hurt people hurt other people. That's another quote by Kreider. And it's fascinating. I think, a lot of the time, I've experienced this too. Like a lot of the time, people who are mean to you or aren't as nice to you, they're going through their own stuff. And I've definitely come to realize this in the past. I've connected briefly again with people who had hurt me briefly, or deeply decades ago. And, I would just tell them, I learned this from the billionaire John Paul DeJoria from one of his YouTube videos. I have to just kind of forgive them. Otherwise, it just drags me down. So once I did that, I realized they revealed to me, one of them revealed to me that she was going through her own crap. And unfortunately, some of it leaked out. And looking back, I've done the same sometimes. My own struggles leaked out, and I unconsciously, brought that to other people. So that's why, although it's really tough, sometimes I'll try and be as positive as possible, because all your actions can impact other people in a positive or negative way. And the more positive stuff you can do, that will ripple and expand exponentially, and it might come back to you one day and reward you maybe 10 times as much as you gave. You never know. So I want to conclude with a final big insight I think I got from Kevin Kreider's thing. I think, if I were to summarize his whole podcast into one takeaway, that's very hard to do because there's so many. But I think one of the big takeaways is that you have to just stay positive and really just improve as much as you can about you in a enjoyable way. Like, you don't want to burn out doing that. I think the biggest differentiator I see between successful and unsuccessful people is simply a positive or negative attitude. If you're just telling yourself with a defeatist attitude, oh, this sucks, and you get bitter and you get angry, you just, spiraling downward until you give up. Whereas positive people, like with horrible situations, they'll flip it around and turn it around. I follow this travel blogger called Alyssa Ramos. I met her at a travel convention and got to interview her for my YouTube channel, my tiny little YouTube channel with 30 views per video. And I got an interview from her, and she's constantly posting on Instagram about how this one thing screwed up or this other thing screwed up. Like, she booked a hotel and it turned out to not be booked or something like that. And she'll always flip it on its head and turn it into something positive. Like, I guess I get this luxurious, outdoor scenic hotel, even though it's really just like a cheaper hotel that's not as clean. She always flips it on her head and tries to find the opportunity or something positive from it. And that's what successful people do. They turn problems into opportunities because they are opportunities. And, I learned this from Napoleon Hill too. So it's not just something Alyssa Ramos came up with, or Ramos, that's her last name. But the point is, try it out. Work on it. I know I'm struggling with it too, I don't have resources or anything, but here I am making the most of it, trying to reach you and help you with this little podcast that I have here. So thanks for listening. Hopefully you got some value. Subscribe and check out my website, willyoulaugh.com.
Thank you for listening to Will's Personal Development Podcast. You can find more at willyoulaugh.com.